It's time to get back working on the airplane again. I spent the last couple months teaching myself how to TIG weld and to make those control boxes for the backseat heaters, and then working on some of the equipment and stuff around here. Got things cleaned up here in the basement to a degree. I put away my welding table and whatnot and moved my wife's little workbench and stuff back in there. It was out here on this end and taking up space here, and it was kind of a tight little spot for her to get in and out of, so that'll be a better work area for her there, and that got it out of here. We can get all of that tools and stuff that I've got in the hangar, and I'll bring them up here, get them out of the way down there so we can get started on the fuselage. We got the skid steer, the Bobcat, warmed up, and I changed over from the dozer blade from plowing snow. It's been warm and rainy here, and the ice is almost gone off the driveway. No snow to plow for a few days. Anyway, I took the dozer blade off and put the forks on. I got the center door of the hangar open, and we got all that equipment over there, all those tools over there on the pallets. We had those the other day, put them on the pallets here a few weeks ago to move them out. So that's what I'm going to do now. I've got room made up in the basement for those. So we'll go ahead and grab those up on the forklift and take them up to the basement and try to get them out of the way here in the hangar. We got all the tools out of the hangar and up here into the basement. 2 radial arm saws, dust collector, planer, router cabinet, my wife's barbecue. Anyway, we got that stuff up here, so this place is packed again. There was only 30% chance of rain today, so we decided to take it to get this stuff moved, and it didn't rain. It's nice out there. It's warmed up to 35, 38 degrees, something like that. But there's a 100% chance of rain tonight, tomorrow, and heavy rain for the next few days, so this was a good opportunity to get this stuff moved. Well, finally getting back out here to do a little work on the airplane. It's been quite a while, but it's probably just as well because there's no real heat in here in the hangar. I've got a wood stove back over there in the corner, and I've got some infrared heaters suspended from the ceiling. And when it's not too cold out here, if you're standing right underneath those are okay. But this place has got gaps there you could stick your fingers through on the sides and stuff, and there's no insulation in it. And I used to have a nice tarp here on the front on the door that kind of kept the wind from coming through there, but that's kind of disintegrated. It was black, so I'd get a little bit of solar gain from it, a little bit of heat from it. It's still on there because it keeps a little bit of the wind and the rain from blowing through, but not like it did before. So anyway, there's nothing to retain any heat in here, and it's been down as low as 10 degrees, so it's been kind of chilly to be working with your hands in here. But it warmed up a few days ago. Yesterday it was up into the low 40s. Come out here to start working on the plane and thought I was going to get busy on it, and wound up spending most of the day straightening this place up, and most of the day today straightening it up. I finally got it to where it's workable, so I can get started on here now. I sent that cabin backseat heat air box down to my mechanic to have him inspect it and approve it, to check it out before I put it on. And he called me a couple days ago, said that he looked at it and they all looked real good. He was happy with them, so he's going to send them back so I can get that put in. Once I get that stuff taken care of, then I can put the boot cowl on and start putting the windshield in. Well, this is one of the things I have to do now, is to take these things off. These tubes I made on here for attachments for that rotisserie to hold the airplane on the stand and rotate it around. And they're 6-inch long pieces of 40-41 tubing. Well, those bolt on in here on the inside, and I'd like to get those changed out to put the mount pad in there. And this is they call it a bracket, a mount bracket, This is the bracket that goes on here, mounts right here with an AN6 bolt, 3/8" bolt. So that's the plan for the day now. I can get these mounted on there, and then I have to do some kind of a modification to these tubes so that I can mount that rotisserie back on there, because I'm going to want to be able to put that on to rotate that airplane around to mount the cowling back on there, and just to mount up the windshield and get it fitted. And once I get that done, then I'll be taking all that off and put it on that little stand that I made to put the wings on with. I took these and sandblasted them all, cleaned them all up real good, powder coated them, so they'll go on here. And this is the bracket here, and it goes on with an AN6 bolt with a nut on the back side, and then something that's not shown on here. Normally these come with a hinge bracket so that the engine will swing on the engine mount, open up so you can get access to the back of it, and there's a bracket on here, a stop, that only allows it to go out so far. I don't have that on here. And something that they do have, though, it only shows on this part down here, is a fiber washer that goes behind this bracket. And so I got some of those, and that's something that is not real apparent, but the fiber washer goes on between the mount pad on the airframe and the firewall, and then another fiber washer goes on the outside of the firewall, and that's something you have to look close at to find it. Anyway, those go on there. I can get those put on. There's the parts diagram, and then here's the parts list here. They're showing that fiber washer, and then the bracket, the bolt, and the nut, and then those will be torqued down to 160 to 190 inch-pounds. Well, if I thought I was just going to be able to start right up and start working on the airplane here, take up where I left off, I was sadly mistaken. Thought I had everything down here in the hangar that I needed. I moved all the airplane stuff down here from the basement when I moved the airframe down here, and then I set the basement up to do the machine work with the lathe tools and stuff up there. But I got brand new bolts to use for this, and of course I got the nuts down here, the AN 365 624 nuts down here, and most everything else. But when I went to find these washers, I couldn't find them anywhere down here. Well, I went up to the basement and dug around up there, and I found a whole bunch of stuff that goes to the airplane that I didn't bring down here, that I'd stuck up on a shelf. But anyway, I got that figured out, so we can get started putting this back together again. As I said, I've got the clamp here, the bracket here, that I cleaned up, and I powder coated them. Now, ordinarily on almost everything I've been using stainless steel hardware, because we're in a highly corrosive environment here on the saltwater, on the floats. But for the structurally stressed parts, for the structurally important parts, they're going to go with the standard AN hardware. A standard AN CAD plated steel bolt is 125,000 pounds per square inch of strength in it, and an AN stainless steel bolt, I believe, is either 110 or 115 psi, so it's not quite as strong. The stainless steel is not quite as strong as the regular steel. Since this is a structurally critical part, attaching the engine mount to the airframe, of course there's a lot of stress on that, where the engine is basically pulling the airplane around. Plus it's holding up all of that weight of the engine and the propeller out on the front, which you get into turbulence in the air can be pretty good G-loads, and landing, anything but a perfect landing is going to have G-loads, some of them pretty high, some of them put a lot of stress on it and make a hard landing, or landing in the rough water. Takeoff is the same way. And it's the same with the wing attach fittings. I use standard AN bolts on the wing attach fittings too, instead of stainless steel. Every place that's not quite so structurally important, I'll use stainless steel on. But since I'm using AN bolts, and these are brand new bolts and brand new CAD plated bolts, but they're still subject to rust, so I've got my Black Bear peralkatone, and I'm going to coat everything liberally with that. Of course, this stuff's pretty hard right now. I did have it sticking in front of the heater, but it's still pretty cold. I didn't have the heater on until late this morning, well, until this morning, but it's not directly on these anyway. So I'll start out with a liberal coat there on the head of that bolt. The bolt goes down in that bracket, and then I don't need a wrench on that end because that bolt fits tight in that bracket. Well, anyway, then we'll smear some more on there, and on the back of that bracket. I'll put that fiber washer on there, and then I'll go ahead and take this and smear it in the bolt hole in the airframe there in the mount. I'll go ahead and smear some in there, and then put some on the other end of the bolt when it sticks out through the cabin side of the firewall. And of course, once I get the nut on and everything, I'll go ahead and goop it up some more. We got these two brackets on the right side in. So they take an AN 6-20A bolt and an AN 365-6 nut. And of course, these fiber lock washers and the bracket here, the U bracket, that's the attachment. The firewall now has ears that slide over the top of these brackets here, and the bolt goes down through them. It takes an AN 6-16 bolt. Anyway, these bolt heads are kind of encapsulated in this bracket, and so that keeps them from turning, but you need something to keep the bracket from turning. You could put a line-up punch or something like that down in there to hold it while you turned it, but I wanted to make sure that these stayed lined up true, the top and the bottom one. They need to be lined up together because that engine mount attaches to both of them. And then the pins, the bolts, actually you take the bolts out on this right side, and the ones on the left side stay in, and the engine mount can swing, so the engine can swing over a little bit. But what I did here was I got a piece of 3/8 inch rod and run down through both of them so that they would line up and stay lined up, and that would also keep these bolts from turning on this end. I can knock that pin out of there, and those will be all lined up, and I can switch it over to the other side and tighten the bolts up on it. Here's the nuts in here. They're in the inside of that frame. That one's from the outside here was fairly easy to get to. From the inside, of course, if everything's closed up, you got to kind of lay on your back under the instrument panel and twist your mouth just right and have fingers that are 8 inches long and with 5 joints in them to get to it. But the bottom one down there, that one's just as bad because the floor boards run into it, and then the inside panel goes into it. So if you take the panel out, you can get to it easier, but you can get on it. It's just a lot easier to put in and out with the boot cowl off like this, so that's why I wanted to do them now. The parts list shows that going together with 4 parts: the bracket, an AN 6-20 alpha bolt, the fiber washer that goes on here in behind the bracket, and an AN 365 nut. But when I stuck those bolts in there, I noticed that the unthreaded portion of the bolt was sticking out a little ways past that barrel that they welded in there for the mount. So I wound up putting an AN 966 washer in there behind it to make sure that the bolts tightened up right. So the right side is mounted up. I've got it torqued down, so now I'll have to do the same thing. I'll knock that pin out of there and move that over there to the left side and tighten that one up. All 4 of those U brackets are bolted in there. Bolts are tight, torqued down real good, and I gooped plenty of peralkatone on both sides of them there. So the next thing I have to do now with this is to make up some kind of an attachment so that I can attach that rotisserie here onto these. That's quite a bit different than what I had before, so I have to make some kind of a deal there. This is the engine mount here. You can see it's got forks that come out there, and the bolts go down through them, and that slips over the top, or that U channel slips inside there much the same way that this bracket that I made here for the engine stand. Well, that's what I have to do, is make something like that. I have to get some metal of some kind or something and figure out what I need to do for that.